The alarm was still screaming when I turned onto Rosewater Lane, blue and white lights washing my porch like a busted carnival. And there she was, Brenda Klein, vice president of the Cedar Grove Bluffs HOA, on her knees halfway through my niece Lily's bathroom window, like a raccoon in a blazer. I got out slow phone, already up with the live feed, paused on her face, and the officer behind me said, "That ma'am." Step away from the property, and time kind of clicked into place. You know that moment when fear turns into, "I'm done." Yeah, that happened. I told her plain my system is geofenced and time-stamped mirrored off-site, and you just triggered a digital trespass alert. 5 minutes after a 13-year-old locked that door and hit the emergency button. Officer Hayes glanced at the screen, radioed for a second unit, and for the first time since we moved here, I felt like the adult in the room. Not because I yelled, because the house itself was keeping receipts. Brenda tried to square her shoulders and talk policy. Routine visual inspection, authorized officer flagged violations. And I just shook my head, not through a kid's bathroom window, not from my backyard, without consent. Not tonight. Not ever. People think I built that security grid because I'm paranoid. I didn't. I built it after my sister's funeral, when I promised Lily nobody would breach her safety again. I wired the place because I've seen what happens when people hide behind words like safety and compliance. I spent months on contract tracing breaches in federal lockdown zones. I learned to separate noise from evidence, to keep everything time-stamped quiet, boring, undeniable, and Cedar Grove Bluffs. Well, that taught me a different kind of breach, the kind that shows up in a polo shirt and fines you for an inflatable pool. The first notice hit 2 weeks in non-compliant accessory structure because Lily and I filled a bright teal pool for one Saturday and laughed in a way the house hadn't heard in years. Then a trash bin fine because I left them out 45 minutes past visibility hours. Then the one that still burns my brother-in-law's cedar porch swing. The last thing he built before the accident. Visual inconsistency with association standards. It didn't clash with the neighborhood, it clashed with Brenda's need for control. And if you've ever been managed by someone who treats power like a costume, you know exactly what I mean. When the second cruiser eased in, and Brenda got guided to the car, not cuffed yet, just hushed, the block pretended to yawn. Curtains, moved phones lit up like the neighborhood wanted the show. Without admitting they bought tickets. Officer Hayes copied my footage and left me with a card. I stood on that porch a long time after the taillights curved away. Lily didn't come out, and I didn't ask. Space is a kind of kindness, especially after a siren night. Next morning, the HOA did what middle management does. When it gets caught with its hand in your life, it wrote a memo. Residents are advised not to engage in escalatory behavior with HOA volunteers, acting in good faith, unsigned passive voice pure. Brenda, and it backfired. Neighbors started talking not in whispers, but by the mailboxes. And in the app, Mrs. Nguyen said, Brenda stepped into her yard to inspect irrigation runoff, Alvarez said. Every time he spoke up in a meeting, an enforcement letter followed like a shadow. A mom on Juniper said, Brenda threatened to report her middle schooler for riding a hoverboard on the sidewalk his dad poured when the city forgot that. End of the block patterns like that don't topple a system by themselves. Paper does. So I printed the bylaws, all 91 pages, sat at my kitchen table with a highlighter and the state civil code on my laptop, peeling back layers like old wallpaper. Until the rules said what they really said. Notice required daytime hours. Exterior only, no entry onto private property. Without consent, nowhere did it say, crawl through a window. The heavier fined, The HOA's liability policy had lapsed 6 months earlier. Public record right there, which meant every board action was walking around without a seatbelt. No umbrella. If it rained, lawsuits. Personal exposure. For whoever signed off, I stared at that line and felt something unclench. Not joy, exactly. More like confirmation. I wasn't crazy. There's always a moment in these stories when someone you don't expect gets tired of being careful for me. It was Ethan Porter, former chemistry teacher, reluctant board member human sigh in a collared shirt. I found him at the community center, half hidden behind folding chairs, and asked for honesty or courage. Either would do, he said. Brenda told the board. It was a misunderstanding. Claimed she had verbal permission from me. Asked them to preemptively censure me, just in case I went public. He abstained, which is a nice way to help something pass without fingerprints, as then his voice dropped and he said, "If he brought me something, would the evidence protect him?" I told him it would, because I wasn't planning a Facebook war. I was building a case. The HOA sent me a fat envelope that afternoon, with fines for digital surveillance, targeting HOA agents, and a warning about community-damaging misinformation. I filed it in a folder I labeled "Pre-Loss Panic Made Coffee" and got surgical. I cross-referenced the bylaws with the code. Clipped contradictions. Wrote a clean 3-page brief with citations, CC'd the County Consumer Protection Bureau and the HOA's last known insurer. No threats, just notifications. Paper cuts in a stack, quiet and unavoidable. Ethan slid me a flash drive and a green binder. 2 days later, at the library, the receipts were boring in the way that makes accountants cry. Paid hours for a private attorney specializing in civil liability, taken from a line called Community Relations, Pre-Litigation Planning, Perception, Mitigation, Documentation, Repositioning. Meanwhile, the playground resurfacing budget was pending, and buried in a folder was an internal recording. Brenda's voice, clear as a bell. If he wants to play the cybersecurity card, paint him as paranoid. He lives alone with a kid. Make that look unstable. I didn't slam the table. I clipped the audio, labeled it Exhibit F, mirrored everything to an off-site archive. Then I went back to my console and re-watched the trespass sequence. It wasn't impulsive. She came up the front walk first, waited, scanned, then circled to the side yard and ducked under Zone C like she'd studied my placement. Premeditation matters. Courts, like patterns, and tucked in the logs was something else. 7 a.m., west fence, small frame hoodie up. Ethan slipping out with the green binder under his arm. My stomach dropped and came right back. People hedge. When they're scared, that's human. I logged it and kept going. I filed my complaint with the state and the county's systematic privacy invasion. Financial misconduct board overreach, attached receipts and logs and transcripts. Then I printed 20 plain envelopes with a 3-paragraph brief titled The Pattern, and dropped them quietly on porches. Last page had a tiny QR code to a view. Only archive, no commentary, just dates and scans. The access counter jumped from 3 to 47 before dinner. And that night, Brenda called an emergency informational meeting to reinforce community trust, which is how you say, control the fire, without admitting there is one. The clubhouse felt like a Sunday school room, trying to be a courtroom, folding chairs, close enough to share a heartbeat, stale coffee in a silver urn, a podium that had seen too many bake sale speeches. Brenda stood straight-backed in Cedar Grove blue. There's been misinformation. She began, our mission is safety and visual integrity. and I just stood up halfway back next to Lily and said calmly that the documents were already with the state, that they showed reimbursements for private legal consults from HOA funds, time-stamped recordings of unauthorized entries, emails instructing manipulated enforcement. And by the way, the liability policy had lapsed, which by their charter exposed individual board members to personal risk. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming. Lansing in the back raised his hand and didn't wait. I never filed a complaint against Lot. He said, she trespassed, broke my pipe, fined me for water waste. A mom near the aisle said, Brenda called her 6-year-old's trampoline criminally negligent. Brenda tried to talk order and harmony, and I told her order is just rules applied to you too. Then I walked a sealed petition to the podium and laid it there like a quiet bell. She didn't touch it. Change didn't arrive as applause. It arrived in sober steps. The County Oversight Committee acknowledged the complaint and opened an audit. An investigator came with a clipboard and a face that didn't care about gossip. The old insurer called off the record and said, if the audit confirmed the lapse, the board was on its own. Roger resigned with a message that read like a hostage note about believing in community, but not current direction. Nancy taped a paper to her door, saying, this isn't what I signed up for. Brenda went quiet. A moving truck made strategic trips, patio furniture gone. That wooden sign that read, order is comfort, not on the porch anymore. Yeah, people notice. We held an emergency assembly that weekend. Not a roast, not a riot. Just a room full of neighbors, finally ready to look each other in the eye. Ethan, smaller for a year on purpose, stood at the podium and laid out the audit and the path forward. Interim committee special election amendments for transparency term limits, and a rule that no board action happens without proof of active coverage. Then the door opened and Brenda walked in. Without the pin, set a single envelope on the table and said, I resign. No cheering. Just a long exhale, like the building itself loosened a belt the next morning. The county posted her resignation. The insurer refused to backdate anything. Ethan got named interim. The green binder went into the new records office under a label that might as well read, this is why, and for the first time in months, the house didn't feel like it was bracing for impact. The cedar swing stayed. Of course it did. The one Brenda tried to label inconsistent. There's a nick on the armrest where Lily clipped it. Chasing fireflies, my brother-in-law carved our names under the seat a week before the accident. Memory beats rules. In any fair fight around 10, I found Lily on the patio sketching the swing. Is she coming back? She asked, and I said, not if I do this right. She nodded and kept shading the grain lines. The loop trail felt different that afternoon. Habs lasted a second longer. The brass plaque with Brenda's name came off the clubhouse wall with a tiny pop like it was never meant to stick. I asked Ethan what he'd put there, and he grinned and said nothing that the wall breathed. People tell me I took on the HOA. I didn't. I took on a person who used rules like a mask. The HOA is a tool in good hands. It's a broom in bad hands. It's a cudgel. If you live in a place like this and you want it better, don't rant. Read. Pull your bylaws. Find the inspection clause. Find the policy number for insurance. Ask where the money went, and make sure the folks in charge can answer without blinking. Quietly being right changes. Nothing wildly being sloppy changes nothing. Paper on paper changes everything. That's the twist most bullies never see coming. So tell me where you're watching from and tell me straight. Did I do the right thing filing with the state and laying out the receipts? Or did I overreact to a nosy officer trying to keep standards? Should a neighborhood's rules ever outrank the people living in it? Or is that how we excuse bad behavior? With good stationery, drop your take share your story. If you've seen power dressed up as policy, hit subscribe. If you believe in receipts over rumors, and send this to the one neighbor who says it's not worth the hassle. Maybe it is. Maybe your street is waiting for you to teach it how to speak.